Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the AVPN Capacity Development Model webinar series. In today's webinar, we start off with the first practice area of pre-engagement processes. My name is Patty, and I am the Membership Services Manager at the Asian Venture Philanthropy Network. With us today are three speakers: Martina, the Assistant Director of the AVPN Knowledge Center; Shilpa, who is the Director of Operations at Caspian; and Avishkar, who is the Investment Manager at Caspian. Martina will start off by introducing us to the recently developed capacity development model, its 5 practice areas, and focus more on the first practice area of pre-engagement. Shilpa and Avishkar will share with us Caspian's way of structuring the pre-engagement processes. I would also like to welcome our members to the session, and for others, a short introduction about AVPN. We are a membership-based organization headquartered in Singapore, working to promote venture philanthropy principles and methodologies in Asia. If you would like to engage with us, please find out more at our website at www.avpn.asia or contact me at patty@avpn.asia. Before we proceed, a few housekeeping instructions. We will not take any questions during the presentation, which will last about 30 minutes, as we will conduct the Q&A after. During the webinar, please use the console to type in your questions, and I will collate them and raise the questions to our speakers at the end of their presentation. If you have further questions that are not answered by the end of the webinar, you can email us. The webinar recording will be posted on our website within the week. Without further ado, I will now hand over the presentation to Martina.
Thanks. To begin with, I wanted to set the context for this webinar. So the Knowledge Center was launched to pull together practices of our members and enable learning. And some of you will have visited us at the 2015 conference in the Knowledge Showcase. We pull together knowledge in 2 ways, with the capability development model and through the AVPN connector. The CDM captures venture philanthropy in 5 practice areas, ranging from pre-engagement over capacity building and impact assessment to portfolio management and finally multi-sector collaboration. In each of these practice areas, detailed cases will eventually form a map of good practices and allow everyone in the sector to learn from each other. These practices will also be shared at events such as this webinar, roundtables, and workshops. The AVPN connector is the second aspect of the Knowledge Center's offerings and has been revamped since its inaugural launch last year to offer you the ability to connect on the basis of interest, geography, and sector. Another new function of the connector is the ability to continue the discussion via the dialogue function. This helps you cross borders and discuss with others in your interest group or your sector. This webinar then is the first in a series of webinars that will bring you the knowledge of the Knowledge Center in the 5 practice areas. In this webinar, we'll focus in particular on pre-engagement. And before we start with Caspian's practices, let me give you an overview of how we see pre-engagement at the moment. First, for the purpose of this webinar, we call social investors venture philanthropy organizations and the recipients of funds social purpose organizations. However, within these terms lies the whole range of investment types in nonprofits, for-profits, and hybrids. So we see pre-engagement as a linear process leading to signing some sort of a term sheet or contract between the VPO and SBO, which structures the relationship for the duration of the engagement. Yet these processes within pre-engagement differ largely depending on the funder. So we've seen different funding practices within grant funders, as well as impact investors. And some social investors take more time and accumulate more costs. Also, especially in Asia, investment-ready and impact-ready enterprises are often difficult to find. Likewise, the deal screening can be an issue because information may be difficult to obtain. So let's dive into these two areas with cases from India, which is one of the more mature social investing markets in Asia. So when we look at generating deal flow, that would be really the first step before deal sourcing. So our understanding from a European context is that certain things are necessities to enable this process. So, for instance, marketing channels of the BPO and the mature SBO market are two factors within that hugely enable the process. Other factors that influence the deal sourcing are the purpose of the engagement. For example, be it by finding organizations that fit the BPO's objectives, or by deciding to create a market through investing into numerous organizations across an entire portfolio. This then affects the processes, such as identifying the potential investment targets and defining what kind of investments suit these organizations. For instance, grants, recoverable grants, loans, or equity, and in which way they are being delivered. Some funders would approach selected SBOs directly or manage open applications. Both are strategic, and we are also yet to assess the opportunistic aspects of deal flow, wherein funders come across good organizations outside these two options. Finally, once this process appears neatly packaged in India, it's worth noting that it's most of the time not. For instance, processes and methods can occur side by side, meaning that once SBOs are identified, investments are defined to tailor the engagement for both sides. Also, the experience of having managed open funding application influences purposes and processes. This is what we hope to cover in these case studies and share back with you to allow you to increase efficiency and effectiveness of your investments. To give you two examples, in the context of grant making and giving circles, DASRA, for instance, is very active in building the foundation for future investors by developing extensive sector reports. It also freely shares its sector reports, and in doing so facilitates how other funders locate good organizations. Similarly, Edelgift Foundation sees its role as an ecosystem builder and in particular recommends their nonprofits to other funders for investment. Next to making the organization known to SBOs, this significantly builds expertise of all funders, builds more mature SBOs through initial grant funding, and hence future deal flow. When we move on to the deal screening process, we found that once deals are located, working out a mutually beneficial arrangement between the investor and investee are crucial next steps. The funder has a role in doing due diligence, but more importantly, leading the relationship building for the entire engagement. To illustrate this from equity investments in India, Caspian is an Indian impact investor since 2004 who does debt and equity investment. Their process for equity investments can be split into two parts. The first of 3 months is a general assessment, while the second part over 3 months goes more into depth and can also involve negotiation about the exact term of the engagement. Caspian has different processes for debt investment, but for now, I would like to hand over to Shilpa Sudhakar, Abhishek Gupta, who will share more on Caspian's processes. For this, we will have ample time for questions and discussions.
Thanks, Martina. Thank you for the introduction and, also for this opportunity. I assume I have control of the presentation now, or will you be handing that over?
Sure.
Okay.
You should have control, Shilpa.
Great. Okay, yes, I do. Thank you. So I'd like to start with a quick background to Caspian, just in addition to what you said. So we've been around for, we're in our 11th year. We were set up in 2004. We are an impact investment manager, investing in socially responsible businesses. delivering financial and social value. We essentially set up pools of capital, and we've set up equity as well as debt funds. The sectors that we have focused on or we focus on currently include microfinance, small business financing, affordable housing, last mile banking, as well as food and agribusiness. So our first fund was set up in 2005, and just to give you a sense of also, I think in the earlier, whether we are impact first or finance first, I mean that really depends on, while we look for social return in addition to financial return, um, the whether it's impact or finance first really depends on that particular fund. So our first equity fund, Bellwether, which was a small fund that we set up in 2005 with a focus on microfinance, was more an impact first fund. So the idea was to catalyze microfinance expansion, more institutions being set up outside the heavily penetrated southern part of India. So the intent was to set up new entities across the country in underserved regions. So that was what drove our first fund. And the second fund was more of a growth fund. This was the India Financial Inclusion Fund, which diversified beyond microfinance into affordable housing as well. Our impact debt fund is the latest initiative. We've done this now for 2.5 years. And we provide debt to impact enterprises across the sectors that I mentioned. We're also adding healthcare and financial inclusion enablers to the mix. So in terms of investment experience, we have done right from Series A investments, where it's basically we've written the first check to the entrepreneur, to growth investments where the deal size is between 12 and $15 million, and now to debt. So I think that we have the experience has been quite diverse. So hopefully we'll be able to share some of that experience here. The team at Caspian has over 100 years of collective experience in building and managing organizations. Caspian funds are also externally rated on social performance. We are rated by Gears. We were a Gears pioneer 3 years ago, so we've been rated 5-star for 2014. So this is a quick background to Caspian, just to set the context, when we get into the other areas. Okay, sorry, I think there's a delay. Yeah, so we start off with pre-launch, and how Caspian has gone about its sort of pre-launch activity on its various funds. And the first step for us, once we zoom in on broadly on the space that we want to focus on, is to do a comprehensive market assessment. We've done that for each of our funds. The sector research, it enables us to just check fitment of these sectors, check market potential, see if there's enough of a pipeline that can be generated, and whether those pipeline companies actually fit the fund's mission and the investment focus. As an example, our debt fund, which is called Caspian Impact Investments, was set up in 2013 after we conducted a detailed market study over 6 to 9 months, which clearly helped us understand the market potential, what was the opportunity for debt, what would be the gap that we as Caspian would be filling among these impact enterprises, and it was on that basis that we chose our first 4 target sectors. In addition, I mean, we are currently diversifying into 2 new sectors. This has also been based on a comprehensive market study that we've done, where of the 4 or 5 sectors that we looked at in detail, we essentially found that at this point, given our focus, given our risk appetite, only two of them were actually suitable, and so that's what we'll be doing. So that's one, I think, key practice that we have followed for each of our funds, is to really scope out the market and to not, compromise on the process that we adopt for that, or the rigor. The second is also the team composition. From the beginning, we have, the investment managers on the team are those who have either investment, but mostly also operational experience in the sectors that we are targeting. This was more true in the case of our first and second funds, where, the investment managers had spent several years actually running microfinance operations, either as branch heads, unit heads, CFO, I mean, COOs, or in one case even having been the CEO of a microfinance institution. So this I think is a big plus. It certainly, when we look at deal flow, certainly ensures quicker deal flow. It is that, enables us to leverage the networks that these people have already spent years cultivating. It also demonstrates to investors, that we have value to add that goes beyond just, writing a check. So, I mean, as an example, so in microfinance, like I said, in 2005, three of the senior investment team members had been had run microfinance ops. In 2009, when our second fund diversified into affordable housing, this was on the basis of the more than decade-long experience that the fund manager had in that space. So there was that much more comfort around, considering that space for investments and being able to not just generate deal flow through networks, but also, to have the confidence to be able to assess those. Um, this, I would say, the fact that, investment managers have had some sort of experience in that sector has also been invaluable to us in some instances, because, while it's not our intent, and I'm taking the equity example here, while it's not our intent to play more than a governance role when we make an investment, I think to have the ability to go in if there is a problem is something that that is very valuable, and we have been called upon to do that in one or two, instances where we actually had to go in when there was a crisis, and we had the ability to go in and spend time and try and fix the issue. So I think that's a big plus that we see, and certainly many investees also see in terms of, the value add that we can bring. Moving on pre-launch. So I'm just going to hand over to my colleague Abhishek, who will just walk you through the next slide.
Sure. Thanks, Shilpa. Slide on the, okay. So like Shilpa mentioned, we ventured out of our default comfort zone of financial inclusion with our debt fund, which we set up in 2013. So in some sense, it was one sector where while most of our team members have had some experience of the food and ag sector, but it was not really the direct experience of running food and agribusiness operations. Our debt fund intends to be a impact fund, sector agnostic impact fund. So there would be more such sectors where we will start lending in the next few years. One of the things that we realized, that in order to have the level of expertise that we have in the financial inclusion space, we needed to do a lot of in some sense a lot more work before we get into a new sector, in order to, in some sense, replicate these strengths that we had in financial inclusion into the other sectors. And the way to replicate that strength in the new sectors that we enter into is our three broad pillars that we identified. So basically, to start off with a good and thorough research of the and build the understanding of the sectors that we want to get into. So we spend close to a year initially before even starting to lend into a sector, and even after we start lending to a particular sector on a pilot basis, we actually do a lot of studies on desk-based studies. We visit a lot more companies than we would typically want to get a better understanding of the sector. We talk to people in the ecosystem, right from academic institutions to actual practitioners, to get better sense of how the sectors operate. The other key pillar for success, in the investment business is essentially having good networks. To get into any new sector that we would want to, work in, what we feel and what we always realize is that it's always necessary to have a very good network, be it the existing investors, be it capacity building support service providers or consultants and so on. Because what happens is, when we are looking at a new deal, this is the network which essentially either helps us do a reference check, or they help us give additional feedback on the supply chain specifically that we're talking about, or in best case scenarios, these networks actually help us originate the deals. They would tell us about which are the good companies that we can look at. The third aspect of getting into a new sector is trying and making sure that we don't make. At some level we would have to take calls on making new loans or investments, but we also want to make sure that at some level the risk is reduced or transferred in some way. And in all of the cases, what we've been lucky in doing is identifying good partners with whom we can share our risk in the form of a risk participation arrangement or guarantees. So one example of that in case of food and ag business that we entered into 2 years ago is the partnership with the Rabobank group. Through different entities within the Rabobank group, what we've managed to get the support on is guarantee support for some of the loans that we do in the food and ag segments. What this enables us to do is essentially take an exposure in companies which we think have a good social impact and a good potential, but essentially companies which we lend just on the basis of the credit as it stands today. So the Rabo facility, the Rabo support actually helps us to go out and support those companies which could potentially have a good, a high level of impact in future.
Moving on now to deal flow and sourcing, a lot of that, in fact, Abhishek has just covered, which is we can't overemphasize the importance that the networks play in both, and as Abhishek mentioned, all of this activity starts even 6 to 9 months before we launch the fund. So in a sense, the soft launch of the fund is happening within these networks, whether it's rating agencies, lenders, donors, investors, industry associations. So all of which plays a very important role both in sourcing deals, and as he mentioned, also for references when we actually encounter a deal and need to make an investment call. We also meet a lot of entrepreneurs. We meet a lot of businesses, a much larger number than what we may end up investing in, and maintain those contacts, because people who are not investable today may become investable in the future. So we try and maintain these relationships. We have not generally, Caspian has not really relied on investment banks too much to originate deals, and I think the strength of the network is such. It has been in financial services, and it is slowly growing to that stage even in the newer sectors, where we do not have to rely on external parties to bring us deals. Although for the debt fund, we have, while in equity, the process was slightly different, and we would, in debt, our website also allows people to write into us, because we understand that there may be many companies out there that that we may not have heard of, or through our network or on our own, but we encourage them to write into us, and we would certainly take those up as well. over 10 years, just to share some data here in terms of the transactions that we've done across the three funds over 100 transactions. We've reached 10 million ultimate clients, which is the target, ultimate borrowers or customers, with over $100 million deployed. This has been our track record over the past decade. Of the 100 transactions, the split between debt and equity, debt would be about 25 to 26, and all of the rest would be loans that we've made. I'm moving on to the next slide on deal screening and due diligence, which is the next phase. So once you source a deal, then what is it that we put those deals through before we make an equity or a debt decision. Given Caspian's focus, given that we are very clearly focused on the impact space, irrespective of the type of instrument that's being discussed, whether it's equity or debt or the size of the investment, which can range all the way from $500,000 to about $10 million, every investment is screened for the quality of the entrepreneur. We place a very high weightage on this, on our comfort with the entrepreneur, on the integrity of the group, of the promoter, the strength of the business model, and how suited it is to the to the objective of the organization, and how efficient it is, and whether it's really meeting the needs of the target segment, as well as the social mission and the commitment to social performance assessment. We would not generally engage in a deal where there is neither stated stated sort of intent to measure social performance, nor any commitment to sort of improve on that and have it done in the future. So we would want to see something in place on day one, or at least a commitment that it will be put in place if the business model as such meets our requirement. The due diligence process also includes, we also put deals through a proprietary due diligence tool, a risk assessment tool, which for the debt fund we have customized for each sector. So this is an attempt to have a more objective sort of score, across areas, and the areas that it assesses companies on includes mission, business model, products, governance, financial management, which has a big weightage, internal controls, HR practices, client protection, community, and the environment. So while this does not automatically lead to a credit decision, so it's not that a certain score gets you a certain, it's not that, but it certainly informs the process. There's also, I'm sorry, I'm having.
So one of the interesting things that I would like to point out here is that if we compare an equity deal to a debt deal, typically a debt transaction by nature should happen at a later stage than a typical early stage equity deal. But what we notice is that given the type of companies that which we deal with, they're typically relatively early stage than normal bank credit, than the stage at which a normal bank credit could happen. So we do a lot of debt to companies which are pre-profit, but of course they have to generate revenues. But even in those cases, because the companies are pre-profit and they're operating in a environment where there is the success of the business is dependent on the supply chain that the company is operating in, we still find a lot of we still see that there's a lot of importance has to be given to the quality of the entrepreneurs in the business, the key management that they hire. So while in some sense a debt deal should be evaluated differently to some extent compared to an equity deal, but what we feel is that in the type of deals that we do, the quality of entrepreneur has a fairly high level of relevance.
Sorry, yeah. So in equity, I mean, yeah, so I think Abhishek has covered what is here on slide 12, which is, there's certain differences, of course. Equity due diligence tends to be more elaborate, spread over several months. Generally takes more than one on-site visit because the level of engagement is, of course, much deeper, and it takes us a much longer time compared to debt for us to get comfortable, for the team internally to have the comfort, to have enough comfort for us to actually make a case to our investment committee. There's also, apart from the business due diligence, there's a financial and accounting due diligence that we undertake in new investments, legal due diligence. In some cases, we've also asked for, or we've also commissioned a systems audit, where we have wanted to assess the strength of the company's loan management system and so on. The deal screening and the process, the timeline for this can, of course, depend a lot on how quickly information is made available to us. And this certainly varies, based on the profile of the companies. With early stage companies or non-corporate entities with, where there's no professional sort of management in place, this can be a challenge. Getting the information on time is not always easy. These delays, of course, in equity, since the process in any case is a 6-month long process generally, or between 4 and 6 months. In debt, this can be more problematic because you are trying to move on from deal to deal, and there is the need to keep things more efficient. And I think the point here that we'd like to make is, of course, we are reasonably patient, and there's a lot of follow-up that goes on with obtaining information. And if there's some hand-holding required in early stage companies, and we understand that, it takes them some time for, systems to be in place. But we're also quite careful about, ascertaining what the real reason is for the delay, or, if there's any deficiency in the information. Whether it's simply a short-term constraint, whether it really has only to do with the fact that they do not yet have all the systems and processes in place, or if there is some deeper issue, which I think can certainly influence our decision even, because we would not want to get into a relationship where reporting, I mean, information is very crucial both before as well, in fact, much more even after you make the investment, particularly in debt, where you do not play, you do not have a role in the governance of the entity, you do not typically have a board seat as we do in equity, so your chance to observe the compared to equity. So information is really all that we rely on, and market intelligence. So we certainly place a premium on that. You'll see now, sorry, just going back. We've just very quickly, this is how our equity deal screening and due diligence process is. So once we source the deal, there is an internal preliminary screening by our management committee, which is an in-house, which is an internal committee. And the idea here is for this committee to quickly assess whether this particular deal, this particular company would broadly fit within the fund's objectives, whether it is a good fit in the portfolio construct, or in case there's any clear strategy that the investment committee has laid out, whether it broadly fits within that. It is in order to avoid any obvious kind of deviations from strategy. Once it gets through initial screening, there's a preliminary due diligence where there are discussions with the potential investee, possibly a visit, at which point based on that information we go to the investment committee. In all our equity investment funds, the investment committee is it comprises independents as well as investor nominees, so this is not an internal committee. And one key advantage that we have, one key change that we made somewhere along the line, and what turned out to be quite useful, was the splitting of the investment committee review into 2 stages, sometimes 3, because if you want to go to the investment committee after you've done everything, then I think the stage 1 that we do is to really get that sign off on what is most critical in an equity investment, which is really the fitment both from a fund objective as well as a portfolio construct standpoint. Normally in equity, the key commercial to be agreed on obviously is valuation. So we'd like to get the ICOM's views on that earlier rather than later, because if that doesn't work out, then you really don't want to get too far ahead and spend a lot of money and time. And also the management, I mean the promoter, the entrepreneur, so if there's comfort on that. So these are the key and some business highlights that we get, this is what we take as stage one. It's a first level approval where they take a quick look at the company, where they're okay with the price that, that has been asked and that we've offered. And it is then that we move on to a complete, comprehensive due diligence, which runs across all the areas that I mentioned before, which is business ops, legal, financial systems, and so on. At which point a comprehensive report is then shared with the investment committee for final approval. So this keeps things efficient. It makes sure that there are no sort of late rejections by the ICOM, that we have some sense of what it is they're looking for, and we don't get ahead of ourselves. So this is the process. Once we have final approval, it moves on to the term sheet. This is the closing of the investment. There's no standard for how long this takes. It depends on various things. One thing that it does depend on is also the stage of the company at which you invest. Whether it's a Series A investment where you are the only investor, you're one of 3 investors, or it's a Series D or E where the number of investors around the table is quite large. So I think efficiency in closing depends on more than just you as a single investor. Depends on how many other parties are involved. Within Caspian, the process, we have an in-house team. We have an in-house operations team that takes care of all closing related issues, right from drafting the term sheet to helping negotiate key terms and conditions, to the finalization and execution of documents. This is something that right from the start we have focused on building, which is to have this in-house team that has all of this expertise, whether it's on structuring a transaction, whether it's on doing legal due diligence or drafting the legal documentation, or doing the financial due diligence. So we do have people who can do this in-house. This has certainly been a big advantage for us because we have greater control on costs. We also have greater control on timeline because it's all managed internally. But like I said, it's also in ultimate timeline of closing really depends on how many people you have around the table. So that's on equity. So I think we'll move on quickly.
Go through the debt process. More or less logically, it follows the same process, but given the fact that the number of deals in the debt business are going to be much larger, what we try to do is eliminate the and the number of deals that we come across are fairly large number and across multiple sectors. We have to close much sooner. What we try to do is whenever we come to know of a new company which is not from the network or about which we haven't had a good bit of an idea, we talk to the promoters of the company in detail and find out the status of the business. We also talk about what kind of offerings we have in terms of the type of loans. Generally, the good part of the debt business is that a lot of the key terms are fairly standardized, so we can have a clearer conversation around the final possible terms that we can end up with. So we discuss all of those things, and if the company is ready, we ask for some preliminary information. Once that preliminary information is available, we do an on-desk study of the company, which is based on actual facts and numbers submitted by the company. If we see that, and at that stage, we can do an informal business team meeting where we try to figure out whether the company is a good fit for the loan at all or not. Once we are fairly certain that this could be a good case, unless there are credit issues observed during the visit, we decide to organize an on-site due diligence visit, which typically lasts for 1 to 2 days, during which we meet the company at their location, meet their customers, see how their processes and operations are taken care of. After that, we come back to prepare a report on the company, which is based again on further data submitted by the or information shared by the company. All of this is put into a credit memo, a report on the company and the sector and such other details, including financials, governance, management, the business model, and so on. All of this is studied by the credit committee. What we also do along with the credit memo is also give a sense of the type product structure that we are going to do in terms of the debt. Would it be a monthly EMI product, or is it going to be a receivables-based product, cash flow-based product? All of those ideas we give, and then the credit committee essentially discusses the proposal based on the product structure and the company in general. What happens during the process is that the credit committee uses the understanding of the company, the sector that we have in general. If you would remember, like I told you, when we initially start lending to a particular sector or get into a sector, we do a lot of studies, and these studies are actually organization level studies. Everybody in the organization is fairly aware of the structure of the supply chain and the way the businesses take place in a particular sector. So they evaluate all of that and then the product structure to come up with a decision on whether the loan can be done or not. Term sheet is issued post the credit committee discussion. Once the term sheet is sent, it typically, depending on the client or the level of conversation, there could be a round of negotiations on the final key terms, commercial terms. Once the company is okay with the terms, the deal essentially moves into the hands of the ops team, which then finalizes the documentation and the execution of the loan up to the disbursal, creation of charge, and so on. So that's what happens on the debt deal.
So just, I think one of the focus areas was also about, how does one manage costs, and how does one keep costs low. I'm trying to move the slide, I'm sorry, just Paddy, I'm not able to really move ahead in the presentation. If you have control, can we move to slide 17, please? Okay. So I don't know if we have Patty. So I'll just continue. I'm sorry, there's some technical issue, but on costs, all I'll say is, I mean, obviously, as impact investors, everyone who's here, being engaged in the social impact space, our fund sizes, deal sizes do tend to be smaller, so managing costs is therefore quite critical. And how does one, stay efficient and still keep costs low? For us, what we have very quickly pointers from our side would be that, focused investment policy, local presence certainly enables high quality deal flow. So we save costs on investment banks most of the time because we are able to originate deals on our own. Most of the external costs that we incur are actually at the setup stage of the fund and not on individual transactions. We have, since inception, as we just discussed in the previous slides, we followed a policy of hiring resources in-house that have the ability to conduct the due diligence across areas instead of hiring external resources each time. I mean, there have been instances where we've gone to an external firm if it was a very complicated case or if there was something very specific that we wanted an external firm to look at. But by and large, we've managed the processes in-house, which has kept costs, significantly under control. The turnaround time from, in our debt fund, from credit approval to disbursement, because it's managed internally, I think we are also able to be efficient. We are able to disburse within a period as short as 1 week if that's the need of the borrower. I think it's also given us a lot of flexibility in the way that we structure the size, in determining the size and structure of our investment, because since a lot of the due diligence costs tend to be fixed, regardless of the size. I think that to be able to just manage that in-house and keep it low has helped us, after deal sizes of about 10 million or so, 5 to 10 million in our second equity fund, we're able to now switch to a deal size of $200,000 in the debt fund without really any significant addition to our costs. So I think that we're able to stay nimble in the market and sort of respond to market opportunities better. So this is on how we have approached the cost aspect. Moving on to slide 18, very quickly, dropouts are also, they have an impact on overall cost depending on the stage at which a deal falls through. In our equity funds, our experience has been that once we've issued a term sheet, a dropout would be quite rare, because really all key terms and conditions are agreed on, all key commercials are agreed on by that stage. So after that, it's quite rare. If a dropout happens, it tends to be in the early part of the engagement, in the first 3 months or so. From our experience, we've seen that it is always best when you are at this stage of the term sheet to make that term sheet as comprehensive as possible in terms of all key covenants that you want to discuss, and not really leave any surprises for the documentation stage, because the documentation stage is, of course, a much more elaborate one, generally involves external firms. So it's just good that there are no big surprises or deal breakers at that stage. So we try and cover everything that matters to us in the term sheet, so that the promoter is aware of this upfront. The key reasons for dropout from an equity standpoint, from our perspective as an investor, has generally been valuation. If it was too rich a valuation and we did not want to pay that, or we were not satisfied with the preliminary due diligence that we did, or if we have not been able to reach an agreement on the key terms and conditions. So these have been mostly the reasons. From the investee standpoint, it's, I think, almost in the few cases where it has happened, I would say it was really for valuation reasons, not even an agreement on investor rights, although that can be one of the causes. The point I'd like to, yeah, actually, I'll just move on to the next one. Dropouts in debt, Abhishek.
So in case of debt, what we've observed is most of the dropouts, and this is actually managed to some extent, is to ensure that most of the dropouts happen before the due diligence visit, on-site due diligence starts. What this enables us to do is, again, keep the costs low so that we don't visit and incur the costs and then realize that we can't do the deal. But one of the things that I would want to point out is, especially in the first few months or the first year when we get into a new sector, we typically tend to do, we typically tend to visit more than what we would normally do in a steady state, because a lot of these due diligence visits in the initial phases actually gives us a lot of insights on how the sectors work. Yeah, and so that's essentially where the dropouts happen, which is before the due diligence phase. On rare instances, it does happen after the credit committee, where the credit committee is not comfortable with certain aspects of the company, where we put the companies on watch. One of the things that is very common in case of debt is whether it is dropping out early in the pricing discussion stage before the due diligence visit, or later on because we want to wait and watch, is that we keep in touch with all these companies on an ongoing basis. And because we believe that over a period of time, these the situations that prevented us from getting and doing a deal with these companies would have been remedied in future.
So just to conclude, some very few points that we'd like to make in conclusion is, this is, of course, since we are India focused, we only have the experience from India in the impact space. It is a reasonably mature space in India, and also therefore quite competitive. So in our experience, I mean, obviously there is a lot of competition for the potential winners or leaders in each of these sectors. The way we see it, of the firms that will end up succeeding and getting the better deals are the ones that enjoy a good market reputation, both among entrepreneurs and other market players. For transparency, for speed, for flexibility, and for value add. One important thing that we've always believed in is investees certainly appreciate clarity and candor. So if the answer is a rejection, then I think that needs to be communicated quickly, instead of delaying it or dragging the process on to the benefit of no one. We also firmly believe in principal to principal engagement. I think while external firms are very useful and play an important role in helping close transactions, unless the principals sit and talk about the key commercials or terms and conditions, the process will always remain a bit of an indirect one. So it's always best to have issues resolved between decision makers, for all concerned, and to keep the process tight and efficient as well. The other reason for wanting to do this is that this period of negotiation and closing is extremely critical, because while we are on opposite sides for that phase where we are asking for something and the promoters trying to resist, it's also a very crucial time for the overall relationship. So one does not want to end up in a situation where we've got all the rights at the end of the day because we fought for it, and perhaps the investee sort of gave in, but it shouldn't damage the relationship. So I think it's important to just balance that, because it's, as an equity investor, that would be a long-term relationship, and we should be mindful of the deeper implications that this whole process of screening, due diligence, and closing can have on this relationship. As investors, I think we should also be clear about how we want to manage this investment once it's made, and be very clear that all of the rights that we are negotiating are not just because those are the rights that investors take, but because we actually believe that we will exercise them, because investees do not want to be stuck with unresponsive investors who really forget all about engaging in the governance of the institution once the investment is made. So I think that is from us in conclusion. So this is from our experience of the 3 funds that we have so far managed, and hopefully this gives some idea of the kind of processes that we follow. Martina, that's all from us. Happy to
Yeah,
take questions.
thank you, Shilpa and Abhishek, for sharing your processes with us. We run actually a little bit longer than expected, and we have a few questions, so I think we're gonna jump into that. One of the questions we received is regarding the due diligence process, and specifically, they would like to know more what is covered under the community and environment client protection. What does that specifically involve?
Sure. So on community and sorry, what was that? Community and environment, and
Yes,
what else?
and client protection.
Client. So for the financial institutions, and in particular the microfinance institutions, Martina, we do check to see if the institution is adhering to the client protection principles as outlined by the SMART campaign. Many of the MFIs in India, at least today, are in fact not just signatories to the SMART campaign, but also are audited on it. So they're assessed on their client protection, adherence to client protection principles. So that is what we check for. The environment is a little bit trickier in the sense, for financial institutions, other than internal practices, about energy saving, and the direct impact on clients, on the low income microfinance clients, is actually a bit, so not all of our companies actually score very highly, because it's of less relevance. to them, but we do check if the institution has policies in place where they do not make certain loans to specific businesses that are damaging to the environment. This can be enforced, I think, much more in perhaps SME lenders where the loan sizes are greater, and hence also the potential for any sort of negative impact. So on environment, I would summarize it by saying it is a do no harm kind of check that is carried out. On community, the questions that we ask check to see if the institution is providing, apart from the financial services, any other important non-financial services within the communities where it operates, whether it's in whether it's financial literacy for their customers or health, health awareness, hygiene. A lot of our MFI investees, run very good programs on non-financial services that really foster a deeper connect with the broader community in which they engage, which is important. So these are the things that we normally check for.
Thank you very much. Then another question was, what do you do with applicants which are generally good, but for some reason you cannot become investees of Caspian?
In case of, typically we see a lot of that happening in case of the debt transactions. And in those cases, like I said, I think what we've done till date and we will continue doing is we keep in touch with those people. So it depends on the reason why we could not do a deal with them. If it is because of the pricing issue, or if it's because of the credit comfort not being there, we keep the company in a kind of a watch. And then in future, whenever there is a loan requirement, once again we bring them in once again and take them to the credit committee to see if we can do the transaction. What we also do is, since we are connected to this ecosystem, if we figure out that there is a way in which if a company is good and they could benefit from some of the other members of our network, we are happy to put them in touch so that they can take some benefit out of those relationships. But yeah, so that's broadly what happens. Martina?
Hi, yes, thank you. Sorry, we were on mute. Anyway, given that we have slightly overrun, we will, for now, finish this webinar. But thank you so much, Abhishek, and thank you so much, Shilpa, for presenting this very, very rich information. As we mentioned in the beginning, there will be another webinar next month about capacity building as part of the capability development model. For now, if you have further questions, please feel free to email them to us, or to kind of continue the discussion on dialogue, which is actually, which is also included in the last slide of this presentation and will be uploaded shortly as well. Thank you so much for your attendance and for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.